Oh my goodness, it is so exciting to be beginning this project for this year, the Worship Design Studio Planning Retreat. It is very special this year, a little bit different than I've done in past years. I'm calling it Small Bites, Big Flavor, because we're going to spread it out into 3 different sessions so that we can go deeper into each season. So small bites, but big flavor, because we're going to talk about how we can bring vitality, we can bring fun, ease, and spiritual depth to everything we do, no matter the size of your church, no matter how much education you've had in terms of planning worship. We are going to get back to the basics, and we are going to remind ourselves how much fun it is actually to prepare worship. And if you are just new to beginning to prepare worship, with a team or on your own, or with a pastor or all lay people, it doesn't matter. We're going to start from the basics and we're going to build throughout the year. And I'm so excited for this to be beginning right now. So let's get started, friends. I'm going to share with you a lot of things this morning. If you're watching the recording, then welcome. Whenever you're watching it, this serves as an orientation for people who have already signed up for the retreat, but also some information for those of you who are considering being part of the retreat but haven't yet. So let's get to it. I'm going to share my screen. Friends, Small Bites, Big Flavor. This retreat is focusing on equipping laypersons who perhaps never had a seminary course, or perhaps your certified lay ministers, or whatever your denomination calls you, if you've been through a training course as a lay leader, or you're a licensed local pastor, or your clergy, you're part-time serving several churches, and for clergy, but we're focusing really on going back to the basics so that we can train our lay people, even in those churches who may have full-time clergy. People are busy. Clergy are busy, friends. And so we want to help our clergy because we're all ministers by virtue of our baptism. Can I hear an amen? And we are going to make sure that we are participating and have the knowledge and the skill sets and the mindsets to have a great time doing this and bringing the word alive wherever we are, no matter the size of our church, no matter the size of our budget. So we are part of a program that Bishop Bridgeforth, he has something called the MILE program, and the L stands for Lay Empowerment. And I'm so very excited to have been contacted by the staff at the Pacific Northwest Conference of the United Methodist Church and asked to do this specifically in this way so that we can educate persons, because more and more churches are being led by lay persons, or they have part-time clergy. And so there are Sundays when lay persons are leading themselves. And so this is part of their initiative, and I'm so very honored to be asked and to go forward in this endeavor with them. So thank you, Bishop, for including me in your ministry. And they have been so generous to allow all of my subscribers and the people who are on my list, and several regions actually have signed up to have access for their churches. We want this very important education and resources to get out to as many churches, especially small churches, as possible, because I know that there's a lot on your plate. You're discerning who you are as church in these days. You are perhaps trying to figure out how worship has changed or can change. After we went through that big pandemic and lockdown, it feels a little bit different. And so we're going to talk about how we adapt and how we bring vitality in whatever settings that we're in. So super glad to be doing that in conjunction with this conference, but with all of you, no matter where you're tuning in from. All right, friends. So many of you, let me move my little bubble up here to the cookie. I think that's kind of fun. We didn't know that when we picked this graphic as sort of our planning retreat graphic, that the Olympics in Paris would be going on right now. And, you know, these little Macrons are special to France. So here we go. We're kind of coinciding with what's happening in culture. We have many people who have never studied with me before, so I'm going to give you a little bit of an introduction so that you know where I'm coming from. And where I came from, friends, is this little church, First United Methodist Church, Adrian, Missouri. Adrian, population less than 1,000. And this little United Methodist Church is where I got to grow up, where I was inspired as a young dancer, as a young pianist, as a young vocalist, I did mime there. I did all these different things, and they encouraged me. And I'm in ministry because of that little church in Adrian, Missouri on Main Street. And so I have a deep, deep love for small churches and the power of small churches to shape lives, to shape relationships. And so I am deeply grateful to all the small churches, especially in all of the communities, who are centers of spiritual nurture, of help, of connection, of relationship. So thank you so much. That's where I started out. All right, so let me also say that as a young dancer, I went into professional dance. In my life next, I went and got a college bachelor's degree in dance education and became a professional dancer and toured the world with the dance companies. And in this picture, this is the Dave Brubeck Jazz Quartet that I got to tour the world with for 5 years. And so the arts became really important to me. I was also in musical theater. There I am as Eliza Doolittle. Actually in her later stages, right? I could have danced all night. And then here's another role, not so nice of a character, kind of a murderous character. So that's why they call it acting, friends, not a murderous thing in my heart. So the arts became really important to me. And then as I traveled the world, I saw so many things. But my trip to the former Soviet Union and East Germany at that time was a game changer for me. I really felt a call to ministry, to bring what I knew about the arts to occasions of offering messages of liberation, of justice. And so I decided to go to seminary, and I went to St. Paul School of Theology in Kansas City and graduated there from seminary, and then went on to begin teaching workshops all over the country because churches started asking me in seminary to come and talk to them about what I knew about the arts that would help them with their worship. And that was the beginning of my teaching on worship. And that turned into my ministry because there was such a demand. This was 30 years ago, friends. I've been doing this for 30 years, and it's been my deep privilege and honor to do that. I have done workshops all over for many different denominations, about 10 or 11 different denominations, and I'm very proud of the fact that Worship Design Studio subscribers come from that many denominations. So then, did lots of leading worship at great big huge events. This is United Methodist General Conference. I did that twice, but always teaching not just about big worship, big spectacular worship where I had a budget, but also understanding still the small churches with small budgets and applying the same principles that I apply to big worship to small worship because we can. And we're going to be all about that in this retreat. All right, so I got my PhD in liturgical studies and ethics in ritual studies and began to teach in seminaries. I've taught at 15 or 16 different seminaries, but all along have not done the full-time seminary thing because I always have felt called to teach people who are practicing at churches, practicing theologians, people, that's clergy and lay alike, equipping people for their work of worship week after week in their places. So guest teaching at seminaries. And then I moved to Lake Tahoe and began to invite people to come. And for 18 years, I held worship skills-based retreats for people from all over the country at Lake Tahoe. It was a beautiful time. And we're going to bring some of those skill set lessons that I would teach in that week to our planning retreat. Again, going back to the basics, small bite lessons so that we can get equipped to understand more fully how we bring the word alive with all the worship arts. And finally, in 2012, I began the Worship Design Studio officially. So actually, it started before that with podcasts, 2008. So 15, 16 years ago, friends, Worship Design Studio. And contrary to popular belief, I do not own a sanctuary where I have a worship design studio. Don't I wish? But this is the vision that I created. I decked out this church and we did this fun photo shoot and video shoot because I want you to understand that you are a worship artist. It takes artistry to bring the word alive. But you don't have to be a professional artist. You don't even have to believe that you're creative, although you are. And we'll talk about that in these retreats over this year. But all you have to do is bring what your passion and your love of whatever you are passionate about, whether that's music, maybe you just love the hymnal, maybe you love visuals, maybe you love just setting a nice table for dinner. All of those skills can be used as we bring worship alive. And so we're going to be seeing how what we already know applies to preparing worship that is vital and alive. All right. So now I'm in Kansas City, friends. Just moved here a year ago. This is the street where I live. It's blazing hot right now in the summer in Kansas City, but things are blooming. And that's what I hope this time, this year of this planning retreat, 3 different sessions will help you feel like you are blooming in terms of your work in planning worship. All right, friends. So in these planning retreats, we're going to do not just skill set lessons, but mindset lessons. It's really important for us to sort of, when we're going back to the basics, to ask some really deep questions about who we are and what we're doing, the purpose of what we're doing. And we're going to do a little bit of that in our first retreat. So I want to say that we're going to demonstrate how to adapt worship for even the tiniest of congregations, because wherever there are 2 or more gathered, there will be good, that's meaningful and memorable worship, and what I call sensory rich worship. So these mindset lessons, the first session in August, we're going to start with this basic question: what is church? Church is changing, as you know, and you may feel like the church that you had 50 years ago or 30 or even 10 years ago, or even just pre-pandemic, was different than the way it feels now. So how can we reclaim a new vision of who we are, what we're doing, what we're about, and how does that affect how we worship? We'll also ask the question, what is worship? Sometimes we hang on to a vision of what we grew up with or what we've known for so long about what worship is. And there's no reason to throw the baby out with the bathwater. Believe me, I am not about that. But there are ways to look at tradition over the long view of tradition and say, what did churches do in different parts of history when they were faced with smaller communities, perhaps, or faced with less resources, or faced with needing to reach out beyond their walls when they didn't have walls, right? So we're going to take a longer view of what worship has been and what it can be. So can we worship, for instance, when we don't have a preacher? This may be a question that some of your churches are asking, those who are lay-led and you rely on guest preachers. So what could you do to proclaim the word in a vital way that doesn't require you to always be asking guest preachers? We'll look at that. We'll also look at how can we have small group worship where we don't necessarily have a sermon, but we have really deeply beautiful spiritual conversations. So we're going to look at all kinds of possibilities. I am going to, as part of this mindset lesson, in the August retreat, that's the first one coming up, I'm going to have a conversation with Michael Beck, who is one of the authors of a book called Fresh Expressions of the Rural Church. Now, small churches are not just rural, they're all over, they're in all kinds of demographics. But this is a beautiful book about reclaiming the beauty, the gift that is the small church. And so I'm going to have a little conversation with Michael and have that for you in that August retreat. One of the things that he says in that is when we engage in ministries, including worship, we aren't creating a product to help the church grow. So in other words, if our only goal is to grow the church, then we may be missing out on some opportunities. Because what he says is we are offering sustenance for neighbors who depend on one another. That's the beauty of small churches in small places. And whether or not they come to Sunday morning worship or not, there are ways to provide spiritual sustenance. And so we're going to look at how can we take the things we prepare for Sunday morning and extend that beyond our walls in simple, easy ways that can perhaps help someone along the way who maybe isn't a member of your church. So that's an example of kind of asking ourselves, what do we need to do and shift in our attitudes about what church is, what worship is, how we connect with the community. And we're gonna weave all of that into our skill sets. So Skillset Lessons, we are going to get to the nitty-gritty, very practical things that you can do, not just theory about what worship is, but we're going to get really, really practical. So sometimes we assume that if we have small congregations, we cannot do sensory-rich worship well or at all, which could not be further from the truth, my friends. No matter how intimate our setting or how big our setting, we can engage all of the senses. And there's a really good reason why we need to engage all of the senses. And that is because we all learn and communicate in different ways. So I'm going to give you an example of a skill set lesson that I've been using for a long time, and it makes so much sense when I teach it because people begin to see, it's not, worship is not about having an opinion about something that's good or bad, but it's that we are attracted to different things because our brains are literally wired in different ways. So Howard Gardner is a cognitive scientist. I'm kind of a neuroscience geek, friends. And so we're going to look to some things that we can understand about our brains and help us understand. And he created something called the multiple intelligences theory decades ago. And really it caught on in education because he said, we have many parts of the brain and they're taking in information in different ways. And so we need to be mindful that people learn and communicate in different ways. Now, I have a picture of one of the series. Friends, let me tell you this, if you haven't heard it already, 3 retreats, and I'm giving away 3 fully scripted worship series because I'm going to use these worship series as examples all along the way of these skill set and mindset lessons. And I want you to have access to it. And because it's small bites over 3 different retreats, for instance, in the first one, we're going to look at Advent, right? The Inn, Housing the Holy is the series that I'm giving you free access to. We're going to look at it and we're going to look at how you adapt for your context. We're going to brainstorm ideas that would work in your community, and that's not going to be the same for everybody because we have different communities and different contexts. So let me use an example from the Inn to show you the multiple intelligences theory. So let's take a look at it first. So we have our brains have lots of different parts in them, and we take in information in different ways. Parts of our brain are taking in cognitive information like that frontal lobe. Parts are sensing the rhythm and the music, and some people really resonate with that. So verbal linguistic folks are going to love the words, right? And musical rhythmic folks are not necessarily going to like the sermons the most. I'm sorry if there's any preachers on here. Some people come for the music, right? And that's the way they get the message. Logical mathematical folks, they like to see the connections between things, and they will notice that before anyone else. Like if the hymn has something to do with the sermon, right? Wow, they totally get that right away. Then we have some people who are cued in visual spatial ways. These are people for whom if the sanctuary never changes or rarely does, they get bored because they're tuned into the visuals. and you change just a little bit, or here comes Advent. Oh my goodness. And they love it because they get more visual stimulation. And when that visual stimulation has to do with the story you're telling, the theme that you're playing with, that you're messaging, then bonus points, they get the message more likely through what they're seeing. Now, some people are more bodily kinesthetic. They love to learn by doing. All right. Doesn't mean you're a great dancer per se. It just means that you like to learn by doing. And so tangible doing, kinesthetic things is something that really helps solidify the message for them. Now, personal intelligences, some of us are more interpersonal, like the interrelationship. So we love the passing of the peace. We love talking to people. But some people come to worship and they're more intrapersonal and they like to go inward. They like to contemplate and maybe have even some silent time, right? So we all come with very, very different expectations based on the way our brains are wired. Again, it's not good or bad, right or wrong. It's just the way we're wired. So let's take an example from the Inn. The Inn worship series is all about how we can be a house for the holy, no matter how humble we perceive our churches to be, right? The inn, the stable, that part of the story reminds us that the holy is born anywhere and everywhere. And so that's really the core message of the inn. And it's one of the reasons why I chose it. It's also the lectionary year C, which is what we're going to be in this liturgical year. But here I have a picture of a very simple setup. That star is likely made out of cardboard with some holes punched in it, with some Christmas lights poked through, and then that simple piece of cloth coming down, right? And there's that manger. Probably you have somebody who can make you a manger, or even you could borrow one if you have a farmer who has a manger. But the simple manger, and you can see that underneath the fabric, there's maybe some lights, and I guarantee you it's probably more Christmas lights, or it might be like a little garage clamp light. Nothing big fancy, right? But isn't that lovely? Just that little scenario there. Now, let's imagine that what we do is we create for each Sunday little strips of paper that are maybe hay colored, right? Just wrapping, grocery bags are that color. So that would be an easy way. And we cut little strips, and maybe during the prayers of the people, we invite people to write prayers or just thoughts about hope. Let's say it's the first Sunday and we're on the Sunday of hope, right? Things on that piece of paper. And if they can't write, like the youngest or the oldest who has trouble, with the pen and seeing anything, doesn't matter. You don't have to put anything on there. You just invite people to that choice and say, just think about what you would put on there, right? But some people could write on there. And then perhaps during the prayers of the people, as some beautiful music is playing, we place those in the manger. By the time we get to week 4, or to Christmas Eve, we have prepared the place for the Christ child to be born, to house the holy, filled with our prayers and our thoughts and our affirmations about hope, peace, joy, and love. Now, let's connect that, just that, to these multiple intelligences, because sometimes people look at this list and they say, Marcia, that feels like a 3-ring circus. That feels complicated. That feels like I have to have a lot of help, a lot of budget, a lot of people. No, let's look at this, because this answers all of those. Verbal linguistic. Just in describing what we're going to be doing, there is that use of words that helps us to focus on preparing the place for the Christ child, right? So the words are proclaiming a message. And then if we write words, then the people get to use their own words. And so you see how that becomes liturgy, the work of the people. There's that verbal linguistic. Musical rhythmic, maybe the song that we hear during placing that in there, maybe that's the same prayer song each week. Maybe it's a deeply beloved Advent song or Christmas song for your people. Maybe it's just an instrumental. Maybe the instrumental each week is by a different person, maybe young people who are studying with the piano teacher down the street. Maybe these young people don't even come to your church, but you can invite them as an invited guest to a solo to bring their music during that time. So musical rhythmic, it gets music in there and it gets it in a special way. Maybe it's people inside your congregation. Maybe it's a recording. Maybe you don't have any musicians, and maybe it's just a beautiful recording of a beloved song. Logical, mathematical. Remember, these are the people who love to see the connections between things. And so what this is doing is connecting a very traditional part of your worship service, the prayers of the people, but it's connecting it to the specific theme about preparing a house for the holy, the inn, preparing that for the Christ child to come yet again into our lives. So they see that connection. Right now, visual spatial. Well, of course, we've just created a visual, right? And we create a bodily kinesthetic in inviting people to put it in there. Now, you always want to, with bodily kinesthetic, you might have folks for whom getting up and coming to the manger may be a difficult proposition. But what if then you invite, maybe you have young persons, maybe even children who you their special role during this series is to go get the strips of paper from people and put them in the manger, right? So we're getting into intergenerational kinds of things here as well. And then the personal, the interpersonal, and the intrapersonal. There's a lot of intra in this one because you give people time to go inward, to think about their prayers, to write those. But then you also see people go and interact with that manger. And so there's some interpersonal things in there as well. So in this one little example that costs very little, that takes very little time to put together. I mean, really cutting the strips every week is probably your most labor intensive, but what a great way to get some volunteers involved because it doesn't require you being a trained professional artist, just requires cutting some strips, right? And so what a great opportunity. Maybe you have a group of people. Maybe you have a group of quilters that gets together weekly to quilt and you just add this onto their to-do list. Or maybe you have a small group that does Bible study. And as they talk, they just sit there and they clip out some of these things. So you can use your imagination to involve people in simple ways that brings worship alive, that adds a sensory-rich element. I hope you're beginning to see, if you've never studied with me before, what I mean by sensory-rich, right? So it brings the story alive and it touches people in different places in their brain because we all learn and communicate differently. So that's an example of a skill set lesson that we will apply to these worship series that I'm giving you for free at the retreat so that you can think about, well, we could do that at our church, but we'll have to put it in a place. We can't put it on our chancel because there's stairs up there. And we want people to put things in. We need to put it down further. So maybe that turns into, well, why don't we put the manger in the midst of us? Or anyway, we'll brainstorm stuff like that because it's going to be different for every church. Okay, so you might not be in a small congregation, but you might feel small on time, right? With all you have to do in your ministry and perhaps fewer hands to help you do it than you perhaps used to have. So one of the things that's really important to me in this retreat is that we talk about best practices in worship design that don't take a lot of time. Right? It's really important because people are busy, right? Especially our most creative people are busy. And so what we want to do is to remember that we can be sensory rich without needing a ton of time to put it together. And one of the best things about that is that with a series for the whole season, then we're not reinventing the wheel every week. Amen to that, right? And so I'm going to be sharing with you some time-saving techniques that I use, that I have used for a long, long time, that I have developed with churches that I have worked with. And so that's going to be a really important part of this retreat as well. So this 3-part worship planning retreat fits worship communities at every size, but it will also be live streamed, right? Some of you will only do the live stream because you're far away from Washington, where these are going to be. Some of you are in Washington, part of that Pacific Northwest Conference that's sponsoring this. Some of you may be in that area, but not part of the conference. You can also come live if you want to. But they'll be live streamed, but also recorded. So if our dates don't work for you, you can watch it anytime. The important part is to make some time, right? And because these are shorter, in the past, I've done the whole liturgical year in one retreat, and it was like 3 days long. But these are smaller bites, right? And so all you need to do is say, okay, this one Saturday, we're going to get people together. We're going to watch the recordings. We're going to work on Advent. By the time you get done with that day, you are ready to roll and you're excited about it. All right. So this can be done whenever it works best for your team. All right. So the dates, friends, August 16 through 18 is our Advent Christmas Epiphany date, right? And as I said, the In is the worship series that we're giving away so that we can all work collaboratively on that. And I can give you examples from that, and we can talk about how that will work in your place, right? So very specific material to start with. So you're not starting from scratch, right? You're starting from a place where we can get really good time learning how to do some creative things in your community. The second one will be January 10 through 12th, and that will be Lent, Holy Week, and Easter. Again, a small bite of the liturgical year so that we can go deeper. And with that, the series that I'm giving away with that is one of, oh my gosh, people who have done this series, Good Enough, Embracing the Imperfections of Life and Faith, have said they loved it. Their congregations loved it. All right. It's based on a book called Good Enough. And it's, again, it's lectionary year C. So for churches that follow the lectionary, we're staying right there inside of that. And you see the visual there is a ladder. And so this whole series is about stop trying to climb the ladder of success, of what society says is a successful church or a successful Christian, and just plant gardens right where you are. And so really simple visual that you can use in your sanctuary, a ladder with potted plants all on it, a ladder garden, right? And so that brings very simply that message along that we can embrace the imperfections of life, because that's the reality, my friends. And we know that God is graceful, full of grace for us in our imperfections. So that one is in January, but again, it's live streamed and recorded and on site. I'll say a little bit more about that in just a moment. The third one is May 2 through 4. I look at that 2025. I can't even believe it's 2025 already. Where did that come from? Ordinary time is what we'll be talking about. And ordinary time is half the year. So we need to spend time on thinking about when you're faced with Sunday after Sunday, because Sunday comes around every week. How do you create vital worship when you don't have those big seasons like Advent, like Lent, like Epiphany, like Easter season, right? So we will talk about that. And the series that I'm going to give you so that we can work on it with it is called Reshaped, What We're Made For. And it's all about our relationship with change. Oh my goodness. But it does it in a lighthearted way that helps you talk about the changes that are happening in your community, in your church, in the world, and does it from a place of connecting it to our faith story so that we might be faithful to understanding how we respond to change from our Christian faith. So those are the three different parts, small bites of the planning retreat. Now, if you'd like to come on site, we'd love to have you. The first one is Spokane Valley United Methodist Church. The second one will be Olympia, Washington, Olympia First United Methodist Church, and the third one will be Yakima Wesley United Methodist Church. So anybody who wants to fly in, you're welcome. Anybody who's near, within driving distance, you're welcome. And we'd love to have you, but of course, live streamed and recorded as well. So if you want to come on site, there you'll register for the retreats, and separately you'll let us know that you want to come. And then we'll give you a link to go register for in-person, because we need to know how to be hospitable, and there's a small charge to help cover the costs of lunch and the host church. And here's some of our folks who are helping us out from the Pacific Northwest Conference. We have Reverend David Valera, who is the Connectional Ministries Executive Director, and he is responsible for a lot of this idea. And oh my gosh, I've known David for a very long time, and he is so energetic and creative and just such a positive person. David, I just love working with you. He's also a fantastic photographer, and he's going to be in charge of the video and make sure that all comes through for all of you. Reverend Sheila Miranda is also from the Pacific Northwest Conference. She and I did listening sessions at small churches there last April. We had such a blast. We were in the car for hours with each other, and we just had a great time. So Sheila will be on hand to help us out as well. Kathy is going to help with registration and all of those details. So she will be on hand to help with that. And of course, my right hand, Jenna, who you met at the beginning of this webinar, she is always a huge part of helping to put these retreats together. She will be online helping all of you who are on the live stream, answering questions, sending questions to me so that I can address them live. But also, if you're watching recordings, we always have a way to connect with you. Lots of different ways to ask questions, email, or in the website, which I'll show you at the end of this webinar. Okay, so we're going to be the first one in August, in just a week and a half or so. We're going to be at Spokane Valley United Methodist Church. This is the sanctuary. Of course, it's a beautiful sanctuary, and they have live stream. You're looking at it from the balcony there, but we're also going to model and demonstrate much smaller kinds of ways to deal with less people in a larger space or smaller spaces. But we're so grateful for this team. There's the team there who are going to provide amazing hospitality for us, as well as amazing artistry. And so I'm deeply grateful to them for this. All right, friends. So I'm going to stop for just a moment. And Jenna, I'm just going to check in with you and see if we have any questions thus far. I'm about to go into a little bit of the orientation session that will set us up for hearing how the liturgical year and my teaching on that is going to inspire us. But before I do that, any questions?
We had one really interesting question. I would love to see at some point these worship resources adapted for immigrants and refugee communities.
Wonderful. Yes, I love that. One of the things about the Pacific Northwest Conference that I love is that they're very diverse culturally. And so we are going to be talking about something that has been happening in Christian worship as long as there have been Christians, and that's enculturation. And what that means is that you pay attention to the context that you come out of. And so if that is one of the contexts that you have a relationship with immigrants or refugee communities, then that is a wonderful focus to look at what we do in worship, and then think about enculturation. And we'll be doing that in our time. I'll be talking about how we are sensitive to symbols and how that can be woven into different ways to present visuals and words and things that would be deeply meaningful, depending on the community that you're a part of. Thank you. That's a great question.
Definitely. We did get another question about whether Worship Design Studio is coming out with a fully scripted Advent series this year.
I'm about to show you that. Yes, it's a big reveal today. Okay, so I'm about to do that.
All
Yay.
right, that's all I have for now.
Okay, great. Let's continue on. I just got a little bit more and then we will let you go. So, all right, let's get me back on screen here. Okay, so history and theology, friends. Every retreat will have a little bit of history about the season and theology about the season, because this is like a little small bite seminary course, but funner because there's no grading. Funner, is that a word? Funner? Anyway, so let's do a little bit here. From the very beginning, humans have been finding ways to ritualize human longing, right? We all have yearning, longing. This is the basis of our spiritual nurture, is our need for that connection to something other than just us. And from the very beginning, we have been gathering together. You see this ancient little picture of this ancient community, and they're gathering together within a circle with a little threshold, a little door. I'll be talking about threshold moments at the retreat. And they gather together to try to find ways to express their human longing. Now, this is a little video of a place in Ireland that I go every year. And I take groups of women there. Actually, I've got 3 more places left on the 2025 trip if you're interested. But this is a place called Newgrange, and it is a Stone Age mound that was a burial ground. Stone Age is about 5,000 to 6,000 years ago. And this is what it looks like. And on the winter solstice, the sun pops over the hill and the sunlight goes through a hole in the door. See, there's that hole. It's a little window above the door. It's perfectly aligned. And it goes all the way back through the little passageway. They're called burial passage tombs. The light goes all the way back to the back where they would have buried their dead. And so this idea of ritualizing, and ritual is a word that I love to use because it means deeply held meaning and symbols. And so for as long as we've been humans, even before 5,000, 6,000 years ago, we have evidence of humans making meaning. Now you see people going in there. It's so cool to go in there. But on the winter solstice every year, there's a few people that get to go in there. They do it by lottery. Someday, oh, maybe I'll get to go. And they see that light coming through. Now, the point of all of this, friends, is that light, especially light, and we're going to be talking about Advent, Christmas, and Epiphany in this first retreat. Light plays a big part. We light the Advent candles. Epiphany is like enlightenment. It's a word that means enlightened, right? And so light is going to be a very big symbol that connects us way back to humans, way back even before Judeo-Christian tradition. All right, so early rituals in humans were about seasons and food and survival and coming of age, procreating, and death, like the one I just showed you. Basically, we as humans tried to find meaning in all the stages of our lives. And that's what we do as Christians as well. And one of the things that we developed then was the Christian year. Now, how did that develop? The Hebrew people ritualized meaning or happenings. When they felt a sense of the presence of God, they would often build an altar, right? They would stack some rocks, build an altar, make a signpost on a road in a journey along the way, to mark something that happened that was important. They began to have rituals of community and promise, right? And covenant with each other. And then Christian ritualizing. After the life of Jesus, we started to tell the story over and over again, the history, the story of Jesus. And that's where the liturgical year comes in. We gain our identity through the rhythms of memory and time related to that Jesus story. And so we make this journey of faith every year through the liturgical year. And we're going to be learning more about each one of those parts, because still humans continue to find ways to ritualize human longing, to make sense of the rhythms of life. That's what we're called to do, friends, is to provide spiritual nurture, both to the people inside our church, but perhaps in our wider community, people who are struggling to find meaning, struggling to find purpose, struggling to find and make sense of what's going on. We all need each other. And so it's really important that we see ourselves and our churches as a hub for spiritual nurture. Spiritual can also be physical nurture, right? Figuring out how to meet the physical needs of folks. But it all comes from our worship of the one living God who came as human flesh, walked among us, taught us how to love each other, how to live peaceably with each other. And my goodness, the world needs more of that. And so the world needs you and your church now more than ever, I believe. And so I hope that this will inspire you in your work. So the history and theology is part of what I'll teach at the workshops, but also how that connects with our human condition. And that's really important because it's not just about planning groovy worship or sensory rich worship. It's not just about that, but it's also about what are we proclaiming? How are we getting the message out there? And if Sunday morning worship is only a limited amount of people, we may need to take what we do in worship and figure out different ways to get it out in the community. For instance, what if we took that manger that we talked about with the slips of paper, and during the week, what if we had times when it was outside of our church, or we took it to the park or wherever people gather and invited them to write their hopes, their prayers for peace, their, whatever it is, and put it in that manger. We offer them just a little touch point of something that is connected to meaning, connected to purpose, it's connected to relationship. So we're going to talk about all of that, but history theology is only as important as the way we connect it to the right here and right now and what's important to us, what our communities need. All right, so that's an essential part. So Advent, Christmas, the yearning for the presence of the mysterious, something beyond, something more. What's that song? Is that all there is? Right? Sometimes we have people in our communities that are just wondering, is this all it is? This is hard. Life is hard. And how do we help connect that to a greater meaning? Something planted and born within us. What is waiting to be born in our lives? That's a great question. It's a great question. What will the Spirit birth in this church? Right? So it's part of what we ask ourselves as we plan worship. Not just what hymn are we going to sing or how are we going to hang the decorations this year. It's really about how will we proclaim the good news. Epiphany. I call it Epiphany Plus because it's Epiphany Sunday and the Sundays afterwards that goes all the way up to Ash Wednesday. We'll be talking about that in this first retreat as well. But there's a yearning for illumination, for knowing, for discovery, for relationship. Oftentimes the stories in the lectionary for Epiphany are people finding out who this Jesus is and going, wow, who is this guy? And wow, he's bringing this message and he's eating with people that, you wouldn't normally eat with. And he's offering this radical kind of love. So Epiphany is a great time to discover again why it is that we follow this man, Jesus. Where is understanding and relationship needed in our church, but also perhaps how does our church need to have a deeper understanding of our community and how we can be in relationship with our community? And, Epiphany happens at the beginning of the year. It's a time when we reassess, our lives and we think about, what are we going to do differently this year? And so it's a great season for us to do that as part of our worship as well. Lent then is that yearning to be fully known, to be accepted, to be transparent. We often look deep inside and ask ourselves some hard questions or some deep questions. And then Holy Week is that time when we remember the awful oppression and suffering of that time in history and what happened to Jesus because of it. But it's not just a story of old. There are people suffering and oppressed in many parts of this world. And so we, during Holy Week, can connect that with our own passion for making the world a better place. And we can say, how can we be more present to the suffering of others? So in that second retreat in January, we'll be looking ahead to Lent and Holy Week. And then Easter, yearning for purpose, for renewal, for new life in the midst of death, starting again. How can we have a do-over? Everybody would love to have a do-over. Guess what? We can. We can have a little resurrection in our lives. How can we live as Easter people without fear? Sometimes that takes change, right? Change within ourselves, change in terms of how we relate to each other. And that's why I'm going to be giving away that series about Reshaped and how we deal with change. Because we all yearn for joy in our lives, more joy in our lives. What do we need to change in our lives in order to have that joie de vivre, as the French say, the joy of life? How do I have more celebration and delight in my life? More awe and wonder in my life? What holds us back from daring to dance our dance fully in life? That is a good Easter season question. And Pentecost, where we remember that the birth of the church meant that this is Jesus Christ's body in the world now. We are the body of Christ. And what is our purpose? And so in Pentecost, it's a really good time to affirm and strengthen our purpose. And so we'll take a look at that in that second retreat in January so we can plan out how we might have those conversations through the Easter season and into Pentecost. And then ordinary time in that May retreat, we will dig deep into this, yearning for something extraordinary along life's journey. Now, ordinary time is not the opposite of extraordinary. It means ordinal, which means a counting or a reading through of scripture. But I like to talk about it in terms of ordinary and extraordinary. How do we see the extraordinary in the ordinary? Because that's all we have is ordinary life, friends, right? And it's just the way we look at it, the way we approach life. And so we'll be talking about what are the things that our congregations need to talk about in our ordinary lives so that we might feel the extraordinary call of God in the places that we are, in the ways that we can. No one church can do it all or even part of it. And so getting really clear about our purpose, especially for small churches, what is our big purpose? What is our one thing that we can do that will make a difference in our place? And then figuring out how to do that, it might mean that our worship looks a little different than it used to, or that we add something that's a little different, that reaches people in different ways. Who knows what it is, right? So that will be something in May. By the time we get to May, we will have a lot of time together, and we will have had lots of conversations around both the nitty-gritty how-to, but also these intersections of human experience and divine intervention. That's what the liturgical year does for us. It walks through our lives and time and the rhythms with us so that we can remember who we are, what matters deeply to us, what we yearn for, and put all of that next to the good news of whose we are, that we are never alone, that we are part of divine love and relationship, and grace is extended to all of us, and we are called to extend grace to others. We're called to make the world a better place. So how do we proclaim that all year long? That's what we're going to get into. All right, friends. So small bites, big flavor. Advent, Christmas, Epiphany is the first one. I'm going to tell you just some nitty-gritty things about how to get into your materials. For those of you who have already registered, you've been sent a link to get into the 2024-2025 Planning Retreat group on our website. Now, if you've already registered for the retreat, a link came to you in your email this morning, I believe. And we will also send that out to registrants right before the retreat as well, and with the recording perhaps. And that will get you into the website. Now, the website, if you haven't been on our website, you're going to first have to create an account. Easy peasy, right? Name, email, make a password. If you already are on our website, like if you're a subscriber who has subscribed to this, or you're just a free member on there, you already have an account. That link will take you right in. You might have to log in, but click there on that sign in if you're not already logged in. And then once you are in, you will be led to that group. Now, be sure you use the same email address that you used when you registered for the retreat, okay? Because that's how we know to let you into that group. All right, now, if you're not redirected to this page that says 2024-2025 planning retreats, when you've signed in, go back to that email and click on that link again, and it will take you right to this. All right, and that's what that looks like. Now, I'm going to stop right here, and I'm going to share with you the actual website. Here we are. I'm on the website. Sometimes when you first log in, you get dumped into either latest activity or discovery or what have you. You can get to the group in different ways, but it's down here past all of our series. And there it is, 2024-2025 planning retreats. So here I am in the group, and you'll see there's where you can add something there if you'd like to add to the list. That Kathy just said, I'm excited about being part of this retreat. That's awesome. Looking forward. You're gonna meet new people from all over the country. That's so cool. But you can just like Facebook, right? If you're onto Facebook, you can just write something in there. You can add a picture by clicking on the picture link. If you want to add more than one picture, you can expand to article, and that will pop up a little thing, and you can put a title, and then hit that little plus button, and you can add pictures, you can add links to videos, lots of different things. You'll get used to using this as we go through and we start sharing pictures of what we're working on in our spaces. That's going to be super fun. All right, there's a link that says schedule, and the recordings, and the way to get in will always be there into the live stream. Here's retreat materials. Now, this is where the goodies are, all right? So if you are already in there, you know that there's lots of things, and we just added more things yesterday, but read through this, how to get the most out of the retreat, how to find things. Here's my series, Do Unto Others, that I just launched. This is specifically done so that we can promote kindness and compassion, humility, respect, and love during this election season. So if you've been wondering how to deal with the election season and the division in our country in worship, get this series. It's either free if you can't afford it, or a donation. So that's a little extra. In New Orleans, they call that a lagniappe, a little something extra there. But that would be great for fall and give you some expansive time to spend on focusing on Advent by using that series. You can check out the virtual studio, which is a very cool place where you can actually have virtual meetings. And it has some lessons in there. I'll talk more about that in the first retreat, but go in here, check it out, see what it is, and have fun in there. Go visit it. It's 24/7. You can go in there anytime. All right, there's general planning resources. I'll put the recording of this opening session right here when we get it done. And then there's lots of different things to look at. These are things that I will reference in the retreat. So if it doesn't make sense to you, just looking at it now, don't worry about it. Then every season has its own materials. So after I get done with the recording, the live stream in August, I will be posting that here. And so if you're going to be doing this on a different day than the live stream, then you'll just come here and you'll be able to have your own little retreat whenever it works for you by watching that recording and then getting into all of these. Now, right away, right now, you can go in and get your get access to the inn for Advent. If you're going to be part of the retreat, then go ahead and get in there and take a look at it so that you can get familiar with it by the time we get to the August retreat and we're kind of looking at how to adapt it, how to do it in different size churches, then you'll be familiar with it. And then here is some of the information that I will be teaching, those little fun facts about the history of Advent, the theological themes, scriptural notes. That's all in there so that you can take your time looking at that if you would like. Lots of different ideas, community extending into the community kind of ideas that we're going to talk about. There's written down there. And drum roll, please. Here's the new Advent Christmas series for 2024. Now, this one is not one that's free. Of course, subscribers, you have access to everything with your subscription. But you can also do it a la carte. But those of you, I'm going to suggest that those of you who are doing the planning retreat that have never studied with me before, that you use the in, because we'll be really using that as examples in the retreat. And so it's really going to be easy for you and those who are helping you to put that together. But if you want a new one, or if you're a subscriber and you've done the in before, you might want to do our new one. It's called On the Way to Bethlehem. And it's based on a study book by my friend Rob Fouquet. And it's a delightful and easily accessible book. And it goes through the different historical places in the narrative of the Christmas story. So we start in Rome because that's where Caesar Augustus decreed that a census would be made. And so that first Sunday in Advent, we talk about how the powers in our lives affect our lives and how we can be faithful in that. And then the next one, I believe, is let's see, where do we go next? Jerusalem, because that's where Zechariah and Elizabeth learn that they're pregnant. And then we go to Nazareth, and then we go to Bethlehem. So that is the new series. And I'm so excited about working on it. And I think you'll really enjoy it if you decide to do that. All right, so that's the new series, the big reveal. So again, Epiphany Plus, all the different things will be here as we begin this retreat. All right, friends, so I think we've gone through it. It's time for us to sign off. Jenna, did we have any further questions from folks?
Yes, we got a question about adapting these worship series to other models like dinner church.
Yes, we're going to do that. Yes. Yes, very, very easy because we want you to adapt. And so we're going to be talking about how if your dinner church has like an opening, right? How to pull out just the opening thing, right? And if you have like a prayer in the middle or after dinner, how you could just pull something out from that, how you could use the devotional booklets that we create for every series as a great way, a gift for people who come to dinner church, or just use the piece of poetry that's in that devotional booklet as something for people to talk about around the table. So yes. Adaptations is all about what we are doing in this retreat this year.
Awesome. That's all I see for now.
Okay, so friends, we have several different kinds of people on here, and that are people who have registered through their conference or region. So when we send out the recording of this, we will remind you what regions have paid for access, free access for all churches in their area. That includes you Pacific Northwest folks, Alaska Conference, and Oregon, Idaho, that's connected with the greater Northwest area. And there's several other conferences and regions that have paid for access, and you have a unique registration link. So when we send out the recording email, we'll have the list of the ones who have. And if you're part of that, then get in touch with your regional leader and find the unique registration link. If you are not part of a region that has gotten access for everybody, you can pay just for your church. And let me tell you this, $150 for a church that has 50 or more people in it. That's $50 per series, just for the series, much less the teaching, right? So that's a big discount on our series anyway. So that's reason enough to sign up for the retreat. If you're 50 or less members, we want to make it super accessible for you. So it's $100. And this includes as many people from your church as want to sign up. All right. So it's not like limited to one person. We really want to educate all the lay people who are helping with worship. So at $100 for 50 or less, that's like 30. That's like a dinner, right? For a series, for a worship series, plus teaching. All right. And if you're a subscriber, you already have access to the series. But for your $100, because you're a subscriber, it's not 150, it's 100. But for that $100, we are going to have a special cohort of subscribers who are part of this retreat, who are going to meet with me on Zoom meetings, meaning you all get to be in squares, right? And we get to talk specifically about how you're adapting, what you're doing. Now, those of you who are in Pacific Northwest, you also have a cohort separate from that, okay? Whether you're a subscriber or not. I'm going to be meeting with you because that's part of the sponsorship of the Pacific Northwest United Methodist Church Conference. Okay, so we will have times in between our sessions where like we'll hop on in October and we'll say, okay, what are you going to do for Advent? What have you decided on? What questions do you want me to brainstorm with you? What problem solving do we need to do? Right. So that is what the cohort will do, is just that face-to-face opportunity. So I know that's a lot of information. All that information will be in the emails that you get with this recording afterwards. So friends, thank you so much for being here today, for all you are, for all you do, for all you're about to do this year in the liturgical year. And I'm so very excited to be walking alongside you in this ministry for this year. I believe that truly deep down in my heart, that no matter the size of your church, no matter the size of your budget, you can bring something really special and you can change lives. I am a product of a small church that had a small membership and a small budget. And I am a product of being inspired so much that it changed my life in terms of the direction and the call of ministry that I heard. So, friends, thank you so much for allowing me to be part of your journey, and I look forward to the year ahead. Take care. Bye-bye.